Hey guys, what is going on? It's Fen here again. So today we're going to be doing a tutorial and we're going to be creating this, what you see in front of you. So it's basically the planet Earth, of course. And the reason I want to do a tutorial on this is because I've been playing with Vray for the past 2 days. So I wanted to create something just to learn Vray. And I thought that while doing it, I might as well do a tutorial with it. And this is what I came up with. So this is a combination of Cinema 4D and Photoshop. I was hoping I could do this fully inside Cinema 4D, but unfortunately it doesn't really have much compositing capabilities, unlike Blender really. So I did have to use Photoshop. So hopefully we're going to keep these tutorials short as possible. So let's just get on with it. So I'm going to open up Cinema 4D. We're going to create a sphere because this is going to be our Earth. I'm going to keep it at 100 centimeters, even though the Earth isn't 100 centimeters. I just want to keep it at 100 centimeters just to try and keep it simple. So I'm going to add 100 segments because I don't want to add any hypernerbs on this because it can distort the texture. So keeping it smooth like this is decent. I'm going to change the type to hexadron. Yeah, this one here, hexadron. I think it's pronounced hexadron. Hexadron, yeah. I'm not going to keep saying it because I know I'm saying it wrong. But that's the one we want. And the reason we want this is because it's all quads. And when we had the texture, we had the bump map, we want everything to keep as much detail as possible. And of course, if you are using like triangles, for example, at the top, you can get some pinching. Even though we're not necessarily going to see the top, it depends on which angle you use. But yeah, that's just the case. So once we've got that, I'm going to press C to make this editable. And then the first thing we really want to do is set up V-Ray, of course. So I'm going to go to the render settings. I'm going to go to standard and change it to V-Ray. Now, if you don't have V-Ray, you could probably follow along. It's not that different, so you could probably do the same with the physical or standard renderer, but of course I've started to use V-Ray, so that this is why I'm doing this. You can find V-Ray for Cinema 4D. It's not that expensive, and you can obviously find it in other means, but yeah. So that being said, I'm going to go to the V-Ray, and one of the first things I'm going to do is going to go to the environment, because if we render this out now, V-Ray really does give us a nice render just to start off with. And the background is like a blue, and this is supposed to be space, so to get accurate shading with our materials, we want this to be black, because that's technically what we're going to be using. So if we render out now, you see we get a more accurate representation of, it kind of looks like the moon actually. But yeah, so it makes a big difference. So one of the things we need to do now is go to create. I'm going to go to shader, and we're going to create a V-Ray material, and we're going to make an advanced material. Now, one of the things to note is that V-Ray, it requires you to add tags to everything. So it's got its own special materials, it's got its own special tags. It's even got its own special plugins up here. And of course, when you right click on something, you've got V-Ray tags as well. So you've got camera dome, compositing, displacement, fur, lights, motion blur, physical camera, which we're going to be using as well, and V-Ray mesh exporter. So I'm going to duplicate this 3 times. I'm going to name the first one Earth. The second one will be named Clouds. And the third one will be named BG for background. I'm going to double click on one of them, highlight them all, and go into this little preview box. I'm going to right click and go to sphere. For some reason, V-Ray doesn't like the fact that I use a custom preset here, so you just need to change it. If you haven't changed it, it'll be default as a sphere anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so the first one we're going to grab is the Earth. I'm going to drag and drop it onto this sphere. Now, we can't see anything in the viewport because we don't have a texture, but one of the things that we need to do straight away is go to the actual material tag and change the projection of the UV mapping to spherical. We also need to change, this is my personal way of doing it, but I put the offset to 125 and for the V offset, with this UV, this is the UV coordinates of the sphere. I put this to -14. That's going to give me the actual the design of this, where we've got the big Earth. I'll show you in a second, because this is kind of where your creativity comes into it. But just to show you kind of what I mean, I'm going to go to the diffuse layer, which is where we're going to add our color or texture. And I'm actually going to go to my desktop here, and I'm going to find the Earth color map, and these will all be supplied for you if you want to follow along. I'm going to click no because I don't want this map to be put in. Now this is a massive map. As you can see, the resolution is 10K plus. It's a very, 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 very big map. You can actually reduce this if you want. You can make it a lot lower, especially if your computer can't handle it, because it is a massive image. So you won't be able to see this in the viewport. Now I'm not sure if this is something to do with Vray, but for some reason you can't see it in the viewport, which is a little weird. I'm not sure why. I think Vray only really likes like PNGs or something like that. It's not a big fan of JPEGs. But if you do a render, you'll see that it will render out the actual texture, so it's not such a big deal. So yeah, as you can see, this planet is, well, not planet, this piece of land, if you like, is over here. Now if you wanted to basically change this, I'll just put on the interactive render region and just kind of encompass this entire Earth, and I'll reduce the quality so it renders out pretty damn fast. So if you go into your tag, texture, and if you just basically reduce this or increase it, you're going to get different results. Now it might be a good idea to put seamless on, and again you can just let's see if we want to reduce this to in the plus, so you want your Earth to look like that, or maybe you wanted to bring it across like this, so you know you've got a completely different look of the Earth. I went with the 125 and -14, and that kind of gave me this result, which I kind of found nice, because in the actual image at the bottom it's basically been faded out, so you don't need to see anything down there. It's just the top that we're interested in. So that being said, this is what we've got, and what do we need to do now? Well, we need to duplicate this Earth, this sphere. We'll actually name this Earth, and we'll name this one Clouds. Now this is ideal, and I know it looks a bit weird now, and that's because they're overlapping, but what we need to do is go to the Earth and go down here to the size, and we want to round this off to 200 by 200 by 200. That's going to give us a really nice Earth, and as you can see it's actually gone back to normal, and that's simply because this Earth is bigger than the clouds. So with the clouds, what we want to do is make this one 202, 202 and 202. The reason we want to do that is because we want to give the illusion that the clouds are up from the Earth and not directly on the Earth. To give you an example, if you look here on the edges, you can see the clouds are slightly above the actual Earth, and because this is going to be transparent, it obviously looks really, really cool. It looks like there's an ozone layer around the Earth as well, which is really nice. So it adds kind of two effects. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag and drop the cloud material onto the existing material, and that will basically give us the same projections and stuff, so we don't have to change it. The other thing it does change is obviously the actual material, so it doesn't have any diffuse in it. But to sort that out, we're just going to go to the diffuse layer 1, and we're going to use the texture map in the diffuse color section. You don't need to worry about the transparency and diffuse options. And we're going to basically navigate to the clouds. We're going to open the clouds, and again we're going to click no. And it's important that you have the same U offset and V offset, and of course projection set to spherical. The reason for that is because all these images were taken from one image. They were broken up into specular, the clouds, the Earth, and all that kind of stuff. So it's important to have them at the same location, if that makes sense. So as you can see here in the viewport, we've kind of got what we want, but the problem we're having is that we can't see beneath the actual image, so we can't see the Earth anymore. Now to overcome that, it took me a while to figure this out actually. V-Ray doesn't have an alpha channel per se, it has a material weight, which is technically the same as an alpha channel. So what you want to do is go onto the diffuse layer, hold and click on your texture to drag it and put it over your material weight, and then just drop it into your color map. Now this is going to do two things. It's going to basically make the clouds see-through, so we can see it's gone like a blue and a yellowy color, and that's because it needs to be inverted. We want the black to be invisible and the white to stay. So all we do is we hit the invert button, and you will see immediately that it changes, and this looks pretty cool, right? So that's pretty much what we've got so far. Now one of the things is the clouds are actually very, very dark. They're not bright, they're not popping, and we want them to pop. So what I did was I went into the luminosity channel and I added a white luminosity. Now if you see it updates, it's way too bright. Maybe that's what you're going for, then by all means leave it at 100%, but I wanted to drop it down to about 8%. I think it was 8%. Maybe we'll just put this up to about 20% for now. Again, we can adjust this. I spent hours adjusting and tweaking this to get it to the way I liked, and even then I didn't get it to 100% the way I liked. But that being said, what we need to do now is we need to jump back into the earth material, because what we want to do is we want to add a bump to this. So we're going to enable the bump, and in the bump we're going to navigate to where our images are, and we're going to use the bump, if we can find it. There it is. Again, I'm going to hit no, and from experience and testing I know that the bump amount should be around 3 centimeters, which will give us some pretty decent details. Also, what we want to do is we want to go to the earth, the cloud, sorry, and we also want to add a bump to the clouds, but we just want to add in this texture again, and I want this to be about 0.5, because we just want the clouds to have a little bit of detail, but not a lot, because you're not really going to see the clouds that much, so we don't need to add that extra render time, but it does help out. Now looking at this, I know it looks a bit blurry, and that's because the actual render settings are down, but if we increase them, it does take a little while to actually render out. That's why I just want to do a little preview, and that's why I keep this very low, because at the minute I'm just adjusting, and that's what you should be doing. It's all about tweaking. So once we've got that, what else do we need to do? I'm going to go to the earth channel again, and I'm going to go into the diffuse layer, and I'm going to go onto the texture here, and I'm going to add a layer. Now if you go into the layer by clicking on it, your original UV, your original texture will be there. But what I want to do is I want to add another one. So I'm going to go to image, and I want to use the lights. Now the lights are around here somewhere, here, called night lights. I'm going to put that in and hit no, and it's going to go above. Now you'll see in the viewport that it changes quite a lot. I couldn't figure out how to blend these properly inside Cinema 4D, so what I ended up doing was changing this to screen, and it kind of gave the illusion that you could still see lights. Now this will come more apparent when we actually add our own lights in. At the minute we're just trying to set up the textures. So that's kind of what I did there. I also added some luminosity to the earth, and that was a black luminosity, and it was set to 8%. The reason I did this was because I believe the earth was a bit too vibrant. It'll become apparent when we add lights, but this is kind of what I did for the materials. So speaking of lights, it's probably a good idea to actually set up these lights right now. So one of the things that's going to add render time to this is when we turn on global illumination. So we do need to be careful. But one more thing before we actually get into that, go back into the earth, and we're actually going to go to the specular. We're going to turn on specular for the earth, and we're going to go into the specular map, and we're actually going to add the specular mask in. And what it's going to do is we need to invert this again. So if we click onto the material and we change the black points to 1, and if you're getting some lag, it's because it's trying to render in the background, so you might want to turn that off, and then put the white point to 0, and that's just going to flip them round. Now, if you look in the preview here, it should update, and it will basically make the water more reflective and the earth less reflective, or the ground if you like, and that's a really nice way just to get the illusion that the water actually is a reflective surface. So yeah, once we've done that, we're going to turn off this render region, and we're going to go into the render settings. We're going to go to the output, and I'm going to put this to 1920 by 1080, and that's going to be our final render view. So I'm going to divide that by 3, and that's going to give us 640 by 360. That way, when we actually put this to our final output, we're going to have everything set up where we want it. So when we add the camera, it doesn't matter what size we put it in, it's going to basically keep everything in because we've scaled down from our final output. So that being said, what we're going to do is go to the V-Ray, and we're going to go to the global illumination, and we're going to turn on GI. I'm going to use a preset of very fast, and I'm going to go into the light cache and basically check on use light cache for glossy rays, because we've got some specular in there. We want this to render out faster, so if we can cache them glossy rays, then by all means it's going to be faster. So if we just get this positioned, let's say it was something like that, and then what we can do is we can actually go and add a camera. We can right click on the camera, and we can go down to the V-Ray bridge tags, and we can put on a physical camera. Now it's important to have a physical camera because it works better with V-Ray. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this render region, and I'm just going to select an area here for it to render out. And we can see the differences that the GI makes and the actual camera makes. Again, this can all be adjusted. Now I'm not sure how long this will take, but hopefully it doesn't take too long. So it's going through, and actually I don't think it might actually render anything out because we do have GI on, but we've got no lights. So yeah, it's not actually going to render anything out. So let's get our first light in. We're going to go to the lights. We're going to use an area light. Now, first thing I'm going to do is right click on this, go to V-Ray bridge tags, and put on a V-Ray light. You need to have this tag on in order for the lights to function correctly. So I'm going to come out of the camera by clicking this little white icon. It'll turn to black, which means we are no longer in camera mode, so we can move around without affecting the camera. Now this is going to be our overlight, this is going to be the top light if you like. So let's rename it to top, and we're going to rotate it. Now it's important which way you rotate it. If you look carefully, you'll see this little blue line. That's basically representing the direction of the actual camera. Sorry, not camera, the light. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase this a little bit, not too much, just to cover the entire earth, and we're going to move this up like so, something like that, and that should be okay. So what we can do now is actually go back to the camera view, and we can just do a quick render in the viewport and just kind of see what this looks like. So you're going to spend a lot of time doing this type of thing where you're rendering it out and seeing if it looks good, rendering it out, you know, there's a lot of work that goes into it. So looking from this, I'm hoping that we're going to get some light in here, but I'm not sure why we're not actually seeing anything. So let's kind of just dive in and figure out why we're not seeing anything. So one of the reasons could be the light just isn't powerful enough. The other reason is our render settings could be completely messed up. So let's just have a look. So GI is on. The GI setting should be very fast, which it is. What else could there be that is affecting this? I think it's just the light personally. So let's increase the light to maybe 4, and we can just use the interactive render region and just kind of get a better look. And as you can see something in the viewport now. So that basically just means that it's there, but because we're using a physical camera, we can't really see anything. So the best thing to do is go onto the camera, and we want to go down to the film ISO, f-stop and shutter speed. We want to first reduce the f-stop. I'm going to put it down to 3, and as you can see, the earth has completely brightened up. The entire scene has brightened up. So we're getting somewhere. The shutter speed could be lower, so I'm going to put this to 100, And because we've got this interactive render region, we can kind of see what's going on. And so far it's pretty decent. We've got the bright light at the top, which is basically giving us the illusion that the sun is up there, and that's where pretty much all the light source is coming, so that's good. As you can see, we've got a really sharp reflection here, and that's because in the earth we need to go to the specular layer, and this is one of the things that you need to remember as well. With V-Ray, reflection isn't actually a reflection layer, the specular is your reflection layer. I'm not sure why that is, but it just is. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually reduce the glossiness reflection to something maybe like 8, and you'll see in the viewport when it updates it'll be a little less sharp and a lot more glossy. So that looks pretty cool. We can actually reduce it a little bit more, maybe 6.6, something like that, just to kind of diffuse that reflection, because we want it to have some reflection because it is water, but we don't want it crystal clear, especially showing the light. So what we want to do now is go into the actual light, and we want to enable shadows. Shadows will help us give some depth to it, because it will basically give shadows to the actual clouds and stuff like that. So that will help. We also want to go to possibly the area light, and we want to turn the invisibility on, because we don't want to see the light in some cases, depending on how far back you're going to be from the earth, but just to make sure, we're going to do that. So what we want to do now is come out of the camera mode, and we want to duplicate this light, and I'm going to turn off the interactive render region. Actually, let me just leave it on, and I'll put it really low, just to give you an update. It's actually quite cool to see it. I know there is an application or plugin you can get for Cinema 4D called Solid Rocks or SolidWorks. It's one of them two, and it basically does the same thing. It gives you an interactive render area, and it just basically speeds up rendering. So that might be something to look into as well. Anyways, we're going to name this back, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the colour of this. So I'm going to go to common and change this to kind of a blue colour. This is what I did in the actual main one, and the reason I changed it to blue is simply because I wanted to kind of give the illusion that the backlit of the earth is kind of, you know, like a halo effect, if that makes sense. Unfortunately, you can do that with Cinema 4D if you use a glow. However, I couldn't figure out how to use the glow with V-Ray, so I ended up just using this. So if we go back to the render in our camera view and just give it a quick render with the interactive region, you can see it doesn't do much, but it does give us this illusion of a highlight around the edge, which is kind of nice. You might not be able to see it with this low quality render, but at the minute we're just kind of blocking things in. So that being said, let's just update this a little bit, well, increase the quality, and yeah, it looks okay, and we're getting there. It's a little bit shallow, we're getting there. So what I did also was I added a final light, which is pretty much a duplicate of the front, but the actual the brightness or the intensity was like 0.5. It was really low, and the reason for that is because I just wanted to give the front a bit of a highlight. So what I had to do was rotate this round and kind of navigate it into place, and of course just put it on the front and just, you know, kind of position it where I wanted it. And unfortunately we did actually move the camera because I forgot to come out of it, but that's one thing you want to kind of do. If you want the camera to stay where it is, even if you want to don't want to move it by accident, you can right click and go to tags, Cinema 4D tags, and put on a protection tag, and then it won't allow you to move it even if you are in the camera view, but that's okay. So let's just do an interactive render region, and you can kind of see it's just brightening up the front a little bit. Again, you can just increase this if you want. Maybe we can put this to 1 instead, and you can see it just brightens it up a little bit, which is nice. So that being said, let's just go into the background now because we're kind of coming to the end. I don't want to make this tutorial too long, but you would spend a lot more time tweaking these to how you would want them. So I'm going to add in a plane, and I'm going to basically put this on the Z plus, and I'm going to make this let's see, 600 by 600, and I'm going to put the width and height segments to 1, and that's enough just to cover the back. So what I'm going to do now is grab the background and plop it on the plane, and I'm going to go into the background, and I'm just going to find in the diffuse the actual background image, which is here. It's just a random one that I took off of Google, nothing fantastic at all. I'm going to go into the actual settings here on the tag and switch the projection to cubic. I'm also going to check on seamless, and everything else is fine. Now again, you can't see it in the viewport, so just do a quick render. Let's do something like this, and we'll just see what this looks like. So as you can see, it's slowly loading through, and it's looking pretty good so far. I'm actually quite happy with the way this one's turning out than the other one. So yeah, that looks pretty decent. We've got some pretty nice lights. The bump looks pretty decent. There's a few things we could do, which I will show you once this is rendered out. There's like one more thing that I did, which was changing the gamma of the scene. And to show you that properly, it will be ideal to have the interactive render region on. But if you're following along, probably now is the time that you could just render this out and take it to Photoshop. But if you still want to finish the tutorial, because I know this is quite long, it's what, 25 minutes, well, 27 minutes now. So I'm trying to make this tutorial as short as possible, but there's so much to go through because I spent about seven hours actually finishing this over 2 days. So it did take quite a while. But yeah, so it looks pretty good. It's a little dark, so what we can do is we can actually go into the render settings, and we can go into the color mapping, because this is like the important feature here. So I'm going to turn on the interactive render region, and I want to keep it low. But the problem with the interactive render regions, whenever you move your cursor, it just updates, which is really annoying. So this is what we've got so far. So if we check on linear workflow, and we can kind of see what that will do to our scene, will it overblow the lights and darks, or will it just give us the same result? From here, it's given us a bit of the same result, which is nice. But this is where we're going to change a lot of this, which is in the gamma. So we're going to change the gamma to 2.2, and as you can see, the earth has brightened up tremendously. Maybe it's too much. So maybe you would want to actually reduce that, because as you can see, the center is very, very reflective, which isn't particularly what we want. So there's two things we can do there. We can reduce this down to maybe 1.8. We can also jump into the earth material and go to the specular and just reduce the specular here down to maybe something like 50. And actually I think it's the opposite. We actually need to bring this up to about 90, 95, and that should get rid of a lot of it. Again, so let's just go maybe to 100, and that's a little bit too much, of course, so maybe 99. And I'm just looking in the viewport as it updates to what's ideal. Okay, so about 97% looks pretty good. And again, you can actually reduce the brightness as well if you need to. Yeah, so I think that will do. So about 78 brightness and 97% with the layer transparency. So once we've got that, again, you can adjust the darkness and light multiplier, but I think that looks actually pretty decent. So let's just say that's done, and we're happy with that. Again, I'm not saying it's done, but you know, if you want to spend more time, you can. So I'm going to save this on the desktop to tutorial test, and then What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the render settings, the output, and crank this back up to 1920 and hit enter, and that will give us our HD. Turn off the interactive render, and what we can do now is just hit the render to picture viewer, and it's going to go through and actually render this out for us. And I'm not sure how long it should take about 4 or 5 minutes. So I'm just going to pause while it renders out, and then we will be back in Photoshop. So guys, the render is finished. It took about 5 minutes and 16 seconds. So there's a few noticeable things on here that I personally wouldn't be happy with. You've got some of the repeating background. Because the background texture was actually really small, we put it as seamless, so it's going to tile it as best as possible. So we've got a few repeating areas here. I had it on the other one that I did as well, but it turned out not to be such a big problem, because in Photoshop, the magic of Photoshop, we can adjust anything. So what we're going to do now is we've got our final render. It is in 1920, so it's massive. We're going to go to File, and we're going to go Save As. We're going to save this as whatever. It's going to be a TIFF, so I'll just say OK. And we're going to put this to Raw Render, because this is the raw render. If you're going to do CG and think that no matter what you do, you're not going to do any post-production on whatever you do, then you're sadly mistaken. Post-production is a very important part, and of course this is just giving a very vocal demonstration of that, actually, because you can see from what we have as a raw render right now to what we're going to have once we do a little bit of post-production. So first things first, in Photoshop we're going to double click on this layer to get rid of the unlock, and we're going to duplicate it. It's always good to duplicate your layer. And then what we're going to do with this is we're going to add some curves. Now the curves will just basically darken and lighten, just to give us this kind of very nice looking. I mean, just the curves alone make a massive difference. And of course, if you don't like it that much, you can actually reduce it. This is all your creativity. So what I normally do is I add a gradient map, and this gradient map will be a black and white. I will probably put it to something like soft light, or perhaps even overlay, depending on which one I want. Probably go overlay, and I'll reduce this drastically. That's just basically going to give us them fat highlights, and crushing them darks even more. It just brings everything out, which I really like. So I'm just going to reduce this a little bit more, and I'm going to do another one, so another gradient map, but this time I'm going to change the colors. I'm going to do something like let's see, from a purple to a blue, something like this, and maybe just adjust this purple a little bit to a bit of a darker blue. And then I'm going to change this to soft light, and the reason I did this is because I want the earth to pop. I want it to be slightly blue. If we just have a look at the differences, the blue really does make it pop, and it makes it just look a lot more earthy. Again, this is all down to just adjusting and getting everything right, so don't expect these numbers to be the exact same as yours. So once we've got them, what else is there to do? Well, one of the most important things is to give that glow around the earth. So I'm going to go to my marquee selection, and I'm going to use the elliptical one, which is technically the circle, and I'm going to drag out and hold shift to constrain it to a perfect circle. And then I'm going to use my thumb on the keyboard to press the space bar down, and it allows me to move it around. So what I'm trying to do is match it up to the actual earth. So holding down the space bar to move, and then dragging out slightly, and something around there would be nice. It's not perfect, but it's close. So I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to fill this in with any colour. In this instance it happens to be black. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to select, and I'm going to go to select, and I'm going to contract this, which means bring it in slightly. I'm going to bring it in by maybe 5 pixels, and then I'm going to hit delete on the keyboard. That's going to give us this very thin ring around the earth. Now I'm going to double click this and add a layer style to it. It's going to be a color. I'm going to give this a nice blue color. Now I'm going to duplicate this layer. I'm going to duplicate it just twice, so we've got 2 of these. And on the first one, I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to blur it about 14 to 18 pixels, somewhere around there. The goal is to kind of get this this highlight, if you like, around. And then for the darker one here, we're going to do the exact same. So Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we're going to reduce it because we want this to be kind of the big highlight. And once we've got that, we're going to drag these under all our layer styles. It's going to basically adjust the color a little bit. And we want to just adjust these because they look a bit bright right now. So I'm going to bring these down just because I want them to be subtle. Something like that. And that's kind of our glow around the earth, if you like. So one of the main things that is going to bring this together, that's going to make it look absolutely sexy, is by adding the darkness at the bottom. So again, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to do the exact same thing, hold down Shift, drag, and just kind of line this up on the earth. This one doesn't have to be exact, it can actually be a little bit smaller because of what we're going to do. So something like that. And I'm going to, before I fill this in with black, I'm going to go to Select, Modify, and Feather. I'm going to feather this about 60 pixels. And then I'm going to fill this in. And it's going to give us this kind of look here where it's faded out to the edges. Now, you're going to have to adjust this a little bit because when we bring this down, you'll see we're going to have a harsh edge here. So just grab the erase brush and just kind of get rid of these edges. I'm going to put the opacity back to 100 and just kind of get rid of this edge. And then what we're going to do is we're going to reduce this opacity down to about 50%. And I'm going to duplicate this with Ctrl J, and then I'm going to bring it down slightly. And then Ctrl J and bring it down slightly. Ctrl J and bring it down slightly. Ctrl J and bring it down slightly. And then we just need to adjust this, something like that. And you basically, all you're doing is you're just adjusting this. So I'm going to grab all these and use Ctrl E to combine them. Then I'm going to Ctrl J this again. And then I'm going to reduce the opacity on this. So the look we're trying to get here is the top is going to be very bright, and as it comes down to the edges, it's actually going to fade off. So I think that looks pretty decent. I'm going to grab both of these and just move them down slightly. And I'm going to Ctrl E to combine them again. Then I'm going to use another Ctrl J and another Ctrl J. So I'm kind of determining how much I want these to show on the edges. So once I'm happy with it, I'm going to select them all again and Ctrl E. So we just have one layer. So technically, all we have is that. It looks weird like that, but once you add in everything else, it looks pretty good. So I'm going to drag it underneath because it's going to crush down some of the blacks from these, which is what we want. And you know, from there, you pretty much can do whatever you want. So that's like the final one. So what I did is I made a new blank layer. I went up to the image and I went to apply image and I said okay. That's just going to give us one image all combined. I'm going to Ctrl J that. On the top layer, I'm going to go to filter. I'm going to go to sharpen. I'm going to go to unsharpen mask. I'm going to use these values here. I think they're default, so 50 by 1 by 0. I'm going to hit OK. Then you're going to use Ctrl F to actually duplicate that a second time. And then I'm going to do it one more time to get some really nice sharp details. And then I'm just going to reduce the opacity on this to something like 70. So just turning this on and off, you can see there's a massive difference in detail, and it really does make a big difference. So I'm going to reduce this a little bit more, something like that. And pretty much from here, you can do anything else you wanted to. So what I'm going to do is make another layer, and I'm going to go to image, apply image. So we have one final image, and I'll name that final. And then you can add your text, but what I did on this is I actually went to the patch tool, and I highlighted around the areas that I didn't like, and I just changed them. Ones that I felt like were duplicating over and over, like areas here and maybe here, and that's pretty much it. So from there, you can pretty much do anything you want. You can add some more layer styles if you want. If you wanted to, let's say for instance, add a color balance. This is where you can get really creative, and you can bring out different colors. You can make it look a little bit more greeny if you want, or a bit more purpley, or you can even make it a lot more bluer. And of course, these don't have to be exact. You can go to the highlights and turn the highlights into a very blue, and just kind of adjust them to your liking. And then, you know, if you think it's a little bit too much, it doesn't look really realistic, you can also just bring down the opacity. Even if you bring it down to something like, you know, 10 to 15%, the differences are there, and they do make a difference. So maybe you don't want this color, but that one looks a lot better. So don't be afraid to actually just experiment. You can add some lens flares in here and just kind of go crazy with adding different things. You can even add a meteor in here, maybe a spaceship or something like that, and just go a little bit crazy. But I mean, that is pretty much the final thing. So of course, just save it. I'm going to save it as a PSD and save it to the desktop. And then all I did was I added in some planet Earth. Now you can see I've got a lot more of my Earth exposed than in this one, but you're not going to recreate something over and over. And that's one of the reasons why I was reluctant to do this tutorial, because I spent so much time actually just messing around different things. It's very hard to recreate it. And that's why, even though we did try to recreate it, it's a little different. You don't have as much, you know, glow around the edges and stuff like that. That's because I added like different effects in and stuff like that. But overall, it looks pretty good, and this one looks pretty good as well. So that's pretty much the tutorial. I hope you guys could follow along. I know this tutorial was I wouldn't necessarily say rushed, but it was pretty fast. That's because I wanted to try keep it as short as possible. But in terms of tutorials, let me know what you guys think. Do you want the tutorials, especially if it's something like this, like quite a long tutorial, do you want it in 2 parts, or would you rather just watch it in one long video? You know, what kind of tutorials do you guys want to see? Do you want to see quick tutorials? Would you rather that I just told you specific settings to get to the goal? Or are you happy watching through, just kind of changing settings and making sure everything looks okay? Your opinion on this is obviously important, because at the end of the day, it's you and the subscribers who are going to be learning from me. So if I can teach you in a better way, then by all means, please tell me. If you would rather see them in shorter, multiple parts, then by all means say that. If you prefer to see long videos, then again, say that. And if you want to see any tutorials on anything specific, like how to make a glass, or how to do this or do that, then please let me know, and you know, I'll see what I can do. I'm pretty confident in Cinema 4D. I'm pretty confident in Photoshop. So if there's any like 2D tutorials you want to see, then by all means say so. And that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I really loved the outcome. I'm really happy with the outcome of this one. The one that we did in the tutorial looks good, but again, I didn't take as much time on this one as the other one, so that's kind of like the only thing that's different. And don't forget, guys, the applications that you use are nothing but tools. Everything you design is down to you and only you. If you're stuck for ideas, go look for inspiration. And that's pretty much all I can really say. From the raw render that we had, you know, just showing you here, the raw render that we had to the final outcome, which is this, you know, it's kind of like heaven and earth. They're completely different. And that's kind of what you need to think. If something isn't looking right in Cinema 4D, then take it into Photoshop, add some different effects, and see if you can actually make it look better, and just kind of go from there. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.